Hello, a very good morning, everyone, and welcome to this stream, this talk, this discussion on the great chain of being and Gurdjieff's diagram of everything living. And if you've been a subscriber for some time, you will have seen that over the recent weeks and months, I've been talking more and more about syncretism, the syncretic nature of philosophies and religions, in the sense that they all have many similarities and that one can extract those similarities from each of them to, I don't know about create a new religion, but to at the very least, it's very similar to the concept of perennialism, but not quite, otherwise I'd just be saying perennialism. And if you haven't seen, there is now a playlist called The Syncretic Sayings with, this is the fourth video within that. And I intend to do more to talk about the self, about God and the world, and many other syncretic concepts that run throughout all the religions and philosophies. And last week we did a video on Gurdjieff and Plato. That is a very good example of some of these syncretic sayings, in which I discussed, again, these syncretic threads: Plato's tripartite soul, Gurdjieff's three centers, Plato's allegory of the cave, Gurdjieff's idea that man is a machine asleep in prison, Plato's concept of the charioteer in the Phaedrus, and Gurdjieff's and the Katha Upanishad, man is a hackney carriage. And so all that to say that this is what's been interesting for me for most of my study and education. Every time I would read a new religious or philosophical text, I would be taken by, hey, look, this is in that one and that one's in this, and all of them say this. So for me, it's sort of a, syncretism, or even synthesis, you could say. They obviously have the same roots. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to begin with, there's this wonderful book by Arthur O. Lovejoy on the great chain of being. So I'll draw some passages from there and also just from online. I have a couple of diagrams from Proclus's Radek Cholp's Proclus, an introduction, a fantastic take on Neoplatonism, which I'll be drawing from. And of course, finally, where we often always end up, Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous. So I'll just say hello to everyone in the chat before I share the contents, a more detailed overview of what we'll be covering. But hello, everyone, and good morning. Substance for the Soul says, top of the morning to you, dear Lewis and Clubbers, and hello there. Substance for the Soul, nice to see you. Let me see if I can get this name right. After yesterday I had some education. Tahuora, or something like that. Sorry if I've messed that up. Kia ora to you, my friend. Welcome. Tahuora. I think there's another syllable in there, but I've forgotten. Graham Fortune, good morning. Welcome. Who else have we got? Tahuora says, what a way to kick off your day. And I agree. Substance for the Soul, what a way to end your day. Stephen Lahn has come in, talking in a number of languages. So, buenos dias, amigo, and hello, everyone. So let me just give you a little overview and what we will discuss in this stream. I'll begin with a general introduction, just a few quotes discussing and sharing what the great chain of being is. Then I'll give an overview of it, the different levels of that chain, just an overview. Then we'll look more deeply at the links of the chain. Then we'll move into two diagrams from Proclus. He's a Neoplatonist, a very famous Neoplatonist, and we will end with a passage from In Search of the Miraculous on the diagram of everything living. And if you're interested to look into that yourself, I believe it's chapter 16. Let me just double check. It's a wonderful section, chapter 16. And it also brings in many other concepts, this diagram of everything living, food, the food that each being will consume, different hydrogens, levels of being and dimensionality, and it's a pretty intense diagram. But the first thing I thought of when I came across the concept of the great chain of being was initially the ray of creation, but then I realized, no, there's an even better syncretic concept in Gurdjieff, and that's the diagram of everything living. So that's what we'll be talking about today. If you haven't yet liked the video, subscribe to the channel and share this with any like-minded friends you may have, and let's get into just some introductory notes about the great chain of being. The great chain of being is a hierarchical structure of all matter and life, thought by medieval Christianity to have been decreed by God. The chain begins with God and descends through angels, humans, animals, and plants down to minerals. The great chain of being, from Latin scala naturae, ladder of being, is a concept derived from Plato, Aristotle in his Historia Animalium, Plotinus and Proclus. Further developed during the Middle Ages, it reached its full expression in early modern Neoplatonism. And as I said, there's been an attempt before myself to bring this concept back, and that's the book I mentioned, The Great Chain of Being, Arthur Lovejoy. And this was published in, this is a rather nice edition actually, Harvard University Press, published in 1936, originally published, and 1964, and this 22nd printing, this edition from 2001, is very dense. If I'm honest with you, I've had a little look into it, and that's what I'll say. It's very dense. Hello there, like a kite. Welcome. And so this concept has come from Plato originally. Sorry, slurping away. So Plato, in his Republic, also the Phaedo, the Phaedrus, it's expanded out. Then the Neoplatonists, Plotinus and Proclus, take all of the Platonic corpus, if you like, and expand upon it. And as we just read there, the height of Neoplatonism with Proclus, then it would have been in full effect, if you like, and also the fathers of the Christian church would have taken some of these ideas and put it into the Bible, in the church theology, and also in their conception of the cosmos and the universe. And here are just a few more words of introduction. The great chain of being, conception of the nature of the universe that had pervasive influence on Western thought, particularly through the ancient Greek Neoplatonists and derivative philosophies during the European Renaissance and the 17th and early 18th centuries. The term denotes three general features of the universe: plenitude, continuity, and gradation. The principles of plenitude states that the universe is full, exhibiting the maximal diversity of all kinds of existences. Everything possible is actual. The principle of continuity asserts that the universe is composed of an infinite series of forms, each of which shares with its neighbor at least one attribute. According to the principle of linear gradation, this series ranges in hierarchical order from the barest type of existence to the ens perfectissimum, or God, and that's a rather nice phrase, or ens perfectissimum. The idea of the chain of being was first systematized by the Neoplatonist philosopher Plotinus, though the component concepts were derived from Plato and Aristotle. Plato's form of the good or goodness in the Republic, eternal, immutable, ineffable, perfect, the universal object of desire, is fused with the demiurge of the Timaeus, who constructed the world of becoming. Aristotle introduced the definition of the continuum and pointed out various graded scales of existence. Thus, in the words of Plotinus in his Enneads, the one is perfect because it seeks for nothing and possesses nothing and has need of nothing. And being perfect, it overflows, and thus its superabundance produces an other. This generation of the many from the one must continue until all possible varieties of being in the descending series are realized. And in Plotinus's Enneads, he talks about a concept of matter as being evil, that matter is evil, it's disgusting. He doesn't want to be associated with the material world. He wants to be off in the archetypal world, in the world of forms and ideas that Plato talks about. And this is because matter, the material cosmos, is the furthest thing from the good. And as we'll see when we have an overview look at the great chain of being in this very famous picture, you'll see how it comes down. And like I say, I'm not going to talk in depth about Gurdjieff's ray of creation, but you could easily put that on top of the great chain of being as well, and see how from the absolute to the all worlds, our world, all suns and all of these things down to the moon, how we exist in, whether you call it a ray of creation, a great chain of being, or a diagram of everything living, whatever one of those terms you want to use. They're all fine, aren't they? You can use any one of them. And if you prefer to look at the cosmos, the universe, and our position within it through one of them rather than the other, I'm not going to argue with you. That's okay. And so now we'll just have an overview, a look at that diagram, the picture on the left of the thumbnail. And it's a very famous picture, and I'll just go through and say a few words about it. And then we will go into more detail in each of those different chains, if you like. So here is the diagram, the great chain of being. And the chain of being hierarchy has God at the top, above angels, which like him are entirely spirit, without material bodies and hence unchangeable. Beneath them are humans consisting both of spirit and matter. They change and die and are thus essentially impermanent. Lower again are animals and then plants, and at the bottom they're minerals, not in this conception, but there are minerals, and thus the higher the being is in the chain, the more attributes it has, including all the attributes of the beings below it. And if you have watched the video that I shared, Gurdjieff and Plato, and Plato's conception of the tripartite soul, in that you have the rational soul, the spirited, and the appetitive. And in this conception of the great chain of being, humanity, humans, three-brain beings, according to Gurdjieff, have the potential to reach up to the heavens and to the angels and gods, but also to descend down into the world of animals and plants. And in the Buddhist idea of reincarnation, if you manifest yourself in this world as a gluttonous, slothful individual, they would argue then maybe in your next incarnation you'll reincarnate as a pig. Or if you're very sort of fiery and angry, maybe you'll come back as a bull or a little dragon lizard. But I'm not sure about all that, and we're not going to digress too far into that. But this great chain of being, in a sense, it's very difficult to argue with, because, well, maybe if you're a secular materialist, you won't give much credence to the angels, but okay, that's fine with me. But anyway, if we take the lower portion, humans, animals, plants, and minerals, that's very scientific. In your biology class, you will have learned about those things. And so now I'm just going to take each of those chains, those levels of the ladder, and just speak about them briefly in turn. So we start, of course, with the top, with God. And God is the creator of all things. Many religions, such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, believe he created the entire universe and everything in it. He has spiritual attributes found in angels and humans. God has unique attributes of omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience. He is the model of perfection in all creation. Angelic beings. In the New Testament, the epistle to the Colossians sets out a partial list. Everything visible and everything invisible, thrones, dominations, sovereignties, powers, all things were created through him and for him. So in a sense, his attendants, God's attendants, would be the angels and archangels. And the epistle to the Ephesians also lists several entities, far above all principality and power and might and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. And there's some more information here about different levels, if you like, of angelic beings. In the 5th and 6th centuries, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite set out a more elaborate hierarchy consisting of 3 lists, each of 3 types. So the top of the chain, if you like, of angelic beings is angels of presence, and they praise God. The seraphim, spirits of love, cherubim, spirits of harmony, and the thrones, record keepers of universal laws. There's angels of government, spreading light, dominions, spirits of wisdom and knowledge, virtues, angels of movement and free will, and powers, angels of form and space. Then the angels of revelation, able to communicate with humans, of which I imagine Archangel Gabriel, who delivered the Quran to Muhammad, would consist of. Principalities, angels of time and personality, archangels, powerful angels superior to ordinary angels, and just plain old angels, governors of spirits of nature. And hello there, JK Techers, welcome. Humanity. Humans uniquely share spiritual attributes with God and the angels above them, love and language and physical attributes with the animals below them, like having material bodies that experienced emotions and sensations such as lust and pain, and physical needs such as hunger and thirst. Animals have senses, are able to move and have physical appetites. The apex predator, like the lion, could move vigorously and has powerful senses, like keen eyesight and the ability to smell their prey from a distance. While a lower order of animals might wiggle or crawl, like oysters were sessile, attached to the seabed. All, however, share the senses of touch and taste. Plants lacked sense organs and the ability to move, but they could grow and reproduce. The highest plants have important healing attributes within their leaves, buds and flowers. Lower plants included fungi and mosses. And finally, the minerals. At the bottom of the chain, minerals were unable to move, sense, grow, or reproduce. Their attributes were being solid and strong, while the gemstones possessed magic. The kind of gems was the diamond. And that was a more in-depth look at each one of those chains. Like I say, you could read Arthur Lovejoy's Great Chain of Being if you want to go real deep. You could read the Platonic Dialogues to get a very good overview, or you could read this Radek Cholp, An Introduction to Proclus, or all of Proclus's writings if you have more than enough time on your hands. But Proclus was as prolific a writer as Plato, and so you'll need a lot of time to get through Proclus's commentaries on the Platonic Dialogues. And well, good luck if you begin and embark. So we can see there, of course, when we're talking about God and angels and archangels, it's a philosophical, it's a religious framework. So if one is a secular materialist or a scientific materialist, a secular atheist, then when I say angels and archangels, you'll poo-poo it. You won't believe in those things, and that's fine. But we're talking here about Platonic theology and also Christian theology and also Gurdjieffian metaphysics. So if you're here and you don't believe in those things, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe go back and read In Search of the Miraculous or Plato's Republic or his Phaedo. And if you're not moved by Plato's Phaedo and the death of Socrates, then okay. So now we'll just share a couple of diagrams from Proclus and from this introduction to Proclus, and you'll see how it's not a exact representation of the great chain of being, but you will see, well, I'll bring it up and you can have a look and see how very similar it does appear. So I hope you can see this. This is Proclus's metaphysics, the material world as mirroring the higher levels. And if you was with us for Plato's Republic and the simile of the sun and the diagram of the divided line, you'll know. So if we start from the top, if you can't see, I can only apologize, and I'll just say them out. But we have here a big triangle, and again, you could argue that this is a representation of the great chain of being. We begin with the top of the triangle, the one, and then Proclus speaks about 3 aspects of of creation, if you like, being, life, and intellect. And these all coalesce into a rational soul. And then the lower half of the triangle is rational beings, animals, plants, elements, Proclus calls it, and then minerals. I can't even see it. No, matter. I can't even read it. So the one, being, life, intellect, the rational soul, and then rational beings, animals, plants, elements, and matter. And this is the first diagram, Proclus's metaphysics. And here is another one, levels of participation. And so the hierarchy of participation, things, the lower necessarily participates in the higher, and the higher doesn't participate in the lower. So we participate in the solar system and the galaxy, but the solar system doesn't have any concerns with the planet Earth, because Earth participates in the solar system purely by its being. And so here on the left, the top left, plurally subordinate to unify with one level. And then there's another diagram, participation of one level in another. So again, we begin with the one. Proclus has this concept and term called the monads, which you could argue, again, if you want to look at it syncretically, they are angels and archangels. Then below that, monadic intellect, particular intellects. Then the monadic soul and the particular soul, monadic nature and particular nature. So this concept of the monad would be similar to the one. And then if you look at these bottom levels, you have the monadic soul and the particular soul. And this is again in Plotinus and also the Bhagavad Gita, the Atman and the Paramatman. So the particular souls would be the Atman, the individual soul. The monadic soul would be the Param Atman, the super soul, and just the same monadic nature would be the cosmos, the whole creation, the universe, and particular natures would be you and I, the cat, the dog, the rat, the rabbit, etc. So they may be pretty intense, those diagrams, especially if you can't see them. And hello there to Donna. Hey all, Donna says, and good morning to you. So they are from this book, and I have a PDF if you'd like to get into this very nice overview and very accessible overview of Proclus, an introduction. It sort of covers a wide range of concepts and subjects. I'll just share those with you very briefly. Historical background, Proclus's metaphysics, Proclus's polytheistic theology, epistemology, ways of unification, inspired poetry and its symbols, evil and theodicy, ethics and worldview. And like I say, I've got a PDF copy. If you're interested, reach out over email. I'll share that with you and be happy to discuss. But it's wonderful. And throughout it, it's a Proclean manuscript. It deals with Plato's ideas, his expansion on them, and it's very interesting. And so now we're going to move into, as I said, chapter 16 of In Search of the Miraculous. And if you've followed with us through In Search of the Miraculous, of course, and you've read every chapter, you will have, of course, seen this diagram, but perhaps you wouldn't have taken much away from it upon first reading, because it's rather complicated and it brings in many other concepts and ideas that fit into this diagram of everything living and the ideas of Gurdjieff's, what Gurdjieff's saying. And Gurdjieff, in a sense, expands out the great chain of being quite dramatically. There's a lot more to this diagram of everything living than there is in the Platonic and Proclean conception of the great chain of being. And Gurdjieff even talks about the different foods, how the food, for one thing, is necessarily a lower level of being than it. And again, if you followed along with us, we talk often about the food for the moon, the organ Kundabuffer, and how humanity is in a sense conditioned and suppressed to feed the moon in the growing ray of creation. Again, I'm not going to digress into that, but what I'll do is I'll just read this. I think there's several slides, 5 or 6 slides, and if you have any questions, then please get them in the comments and we can go back and look at a particular slide again if you'd like to have another look at it, or to fill it out, or if you have a comment, even might not even be a question, a comment, we can go back and have a look at that particular slide. But as Gurdjieff would say that within a symbol, within a diagram, particularly the Enneagram that Gurdjieff has brought to the West and popularized, within a symbol and a diagram, you can read much more information than in a page or a couple of pages of prose text. And so this is why Gurdjieff and through Ouspensky used many diagrams to relay his information. So here we go. As I said, chapter 16 from In Search of the Miraculous. I'll just read them all. Any questions or comments, let me know, and I will then address those afterwards. That's right, Donna. That's exactly right. In one of the following conversations, G again returned to the subject of classification according to cosmic traits. There is still another system of classification, he said, which you also ought to understand. This is a classification in an altogether different ratio of octaves. The first classification by food, air, and medium definitely refers to living beings as we know them, including plants, that is to say, to individuals. The other classification, of which I shall now speak, leads us far beyond the limits of what we call living beings, both upwards, higher than living beings, as well as downwards, lower than living beings, and it deals not with individuals, but with classes in a very wide sense. Very Aristotelian. Above all, this classification shows that there are no jumps whatever in nature. In nature, everything is connected and everything is alive. The diagram of this classification is called the diagram of everything living. According to this diagram, every kind of creature, every degree of being is defined by what serves as food for this kind of creature or being of a given level, and for what they themselves serve as food, because in the cosmic order, each class of creature feeds on a definite class of lower creature and is food for a definite class of higher creature. G drew a diagram in the form of a ladder with 11 squares, and in each square, excepting the 2 higher, he put 3 circles with numbers. And again, I hope you can make that out, but if not, I'll read the text and comment on it. Each square denotes a level of being, he said. The hydrogen in the lower circle shows what the given class of creatures feed on. The hydrogen in the upper circle shows the class which feeds on these features, and the hydrogen in the middle circle is the average hydrogen of this class, showing what these creatures are. The place of man in the 7th square from the bottom, or the 5th square from the top. According to this diagram, man is hydrogen 24. He feeds on hydrogen 96 and is himself food for hydrogen 6. So you can see there, the 5th square down, we have man 24 in the middle circle, 6 and 96. The square next below man will be vertebrates. The next, invertebrates. Invertebrates are hydrogen 96. Consequently, man feeds on invertebrates or invertebrates. Do not for the moment look for contradictions, but try to understand what this may mean, and equally do not compare this diagram with others. According to the diagram of food, man feeds on hydrogen 768. According to this diagram, on hydrogen 96. Why? What does it mean? Both the one is right and the other is right. Later, when you grasp this, you will piece everything together into one. The square next below is plants, the next minerals, the next metals, which constitute a separate cosmic group among minerals. And the following square has no name in our language because we never meet with matter in this state on the Earth's surface. This square comes into contact with the absolute. You remember we spoke before about wholly the firm. This is wholly the firm. At the bottom of the last square, he placed a small triangle with its apex below. Now, on the other side of man is square 3, 12, 48. This is a class of creatures which we do not know. Let us call them angels. The next square, 1, 6, 24, let us call these beings archangels. In the following square, he put figures 3 and 12 and 2 circles, each with a point at their centres, and called it the external unchanging. And in the next square, he put the figures 1 and 6. He put a circle in the middle, and in this circle a triangle containing another circle with a point at its centre, and called it the absolute. And so that was a lot of information to take in, especially if you haven't or can't recall that diagram. And for me, like I said, it's an expansion, elaboration. Gurdjieff's elaborating on the great chain of being. And I remember in our last talk that we did on Gurdjieff and Plato, Graham commented that this knowledge that Gurdjieff is sharing goes way back into history, way back, and it's likely the same information that Plato was also tuning into. And now, of course, because of technology, because of the ease of information, yes, it can be negative in the sense that one can be overwhelmed and subsumed by all sorts of rubbish, especially if you spend majority of your time reading newspapers and online articles talking about politics and the like. You can get digestion, you can be overwhelmed. Whereas if you were to just read In Search of the Miraculous, Plato's Republic, and this introduction to Proclus, maybe throw in the Bhagavad Gita for good measure, you'd be much better situated to approach life and approach, again, where we exist, our position within the universe. And so Donna has a comment, that's the thing with these kinds of books, you can read them once, twice and thrice and still gain so much more from them each time. It's kind of magic, and I agree with that. And I would try to read In Search of the Miraculous every year or so. And again, within that time, I'm reading lots of other books, and I would come back, and just like Donna's saying, it's not even, again, with In Search of the Miraculous, probably the same thing with Beelzebub's Tales. It's not like, oh, I don't remember that bit from before, which can often happen with other books. It's like, hey, this is a new book. How is it a different book? The words are the same. It's the same cover, the same pages. But how can it be such a new book? Stephen Larn has a question. It says, one is capable of being aware of the lives below us in the hierarchy, but not above us. And asking as a question. And I would say that for me, as an individual, I'm not aware of the beings above, being the angels and archangels, but that's not to say no one is able to interact with these beings. There's many books. I have a couple of books, if you're interested, on the astral realm, exploring the astral realm and speaking and conversing, communicating with astral beings. Now, I can't do that, and I haven't pursued it with enough zeal to try and access this. But if someone in their meditation, their physical body is sitting there cross-legged with the candles and incense going, but their consciousness is off, traversing the astral plane, who am I to say, oh no, that's rubbish, you can't, because I can't. And if you follow a religious conception of the world, Prophet Muhammad, he received the Quran from the angel Gabriel. Gabriel came and delivered the Quran to Muhammad, which is why the Muslims take it with such high esteem, because it came from God through the angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. Again, fits very nicely with the great chain of being. and even the diagram of everything living. And that's how we have the Quran. Again, in the biblical corpus, right? Mary was visited by an angel, wasn't she? I think it may well be the angel Gabriel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she was visited by an angel and conceived Jesus, the Immaculate Conception. And so, of course, Mary can have access to the angels and archangels, as can Prophet Muhammad, as can, we could argue, many of the other prophets in the Abrahamic traditions. And my argument to all of my religious friends, and when we would have these debates, is that if it's possible, which of course they would say it is possible because Muhammad did it, Mary did it, Jesus did it, then then it's possible. And they would come back with some statement, oh yeah, but only for the great prophets and only for this and only for that. And I said, but I'm not asking that. I'm not arguing that point. I'm arguing, is it possible? And the fact that it's occurred and it's in your religious scripture would, for me, tell me that it is possible. Just like we read in the prologue of Life is Real Only Then When I Am, didn't we? That Gurdjieff is saying God is the ultimate being of the whole universe, but we are little gods, mini gods, and we have a realm, and a sort of internal and external world that we should be the proprietor of. We should be the great architect of our own lives, and be able to do, right? Gurdjieff would say, become a man without quotation marks, someone that can do, not a machine constantly impacted and affected by external influences. So I would say, Stephen, that I would argue that it is possible. Of course, it would be very rare now. The Hindus would say, well, we're in Kali Yuga, so of course no one's conversing with the angels because it's Kali Yuga, whereas in the, I think it's Dwapara Yuga or one of the higher Yugas, the golden age it would be in Greek and Roman sort of conception, maybe in the golden age in which the Iliad and the Odyssey was written and is, same with the Mahabharata, with the Battle of Kurukshetra, maybe gods were commonplace, maybe angels were everywhere, and it was just the norm because of the vibrations of life. And so yeah, let me know any clarification or follow-up there, Stephen. But just because one can't see it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? It's like the philosophers lots of philosophers that argue for the existence of God. They say, oh, love. They like to use this term. They say love, you can't see it or feel it or hold it or weigh it or measure it, which is what the scientific materialists need for them to agree something's real. And then you say to them, what about love? You can't weigh it and measure it, hold it, but you love your kids, you love your wife, your parents. So what? It doesn't exist because you can't hold on to it. And I would argue the same thing for God, for the angels, and like I say, for anything else. And it's a quite a good argument to stump the scientific materialists. Donna says, just walk on the grass barefoot and watch great nature. See, she's my greatest teacher, and I'm seeing this mentioned in many esoteric books I'm reading, including the Tales. Yes, Donna, that's right. And again, I think it's important to, like what Gurdjieff was saying yesterday in the introduction to Life is Real, to try and avoid the everyday impressions of life, even if that is just for an hour in the morning. Of course, if you have a family, a job, day-to-day routine, you can't go off to the monastery. You can't head off to the ashram. So you have to take a little sacred space and sacred time first thing in the morning. Again, if that's what you need, maybe you follow the Gurdjieff idea and the Iamblican idea in that you really want to be present and aware of divinity and God all the time. Not just in the church or in your meditation room or in nature, but even in a packed supermarket where you're queuing at Christmas and everyone's stressed out. God's there too. It's not like you can't access the divine because everyone's stressed and queuing for Christmas, you know. That's, again, my view is much more difficult than a nice, quiet, peaceful ashram with your Bhagavad Gita. But again, I believe it's very possible to be in the Christmas market with, hullabaloo and lots of impressions, and still be able to have access to that higher level of being. And Donna says every experience isn't for everyone, and of course that's right. And again, you could argue, not saying it with judgment, but just from what I've read and what the philosophies and religions say, some souls are not ready to leave the cave and to even become aware of their prison-like nature. So that's okay. Just like what Plato says in the allegory of the cave. You can't grab a person and just drag them up to the light of the sun. It's not fair, and it's not good for that individual. They would need to become aware that, hey, I'm in fetters down here. What's this shadows, what's this around my neck? Oh, I can take it off. And an individual has to, Yogananda would say, self-realization. One has to realize it themselves, which is why if you've ever tried to, I don't know about convert, but to exhort someone, maybe to read a Gurdjieff text or an Ouspensky book or some other, even Eckhart Tolle or some Don Miguel Ruiz, Paulo Coelho, you've realized it, you understand, and you say, check out this book, check out this book. Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? One has to realize it themselves. So, yeah, you're right there, Donna. And Substance for the Soul says, perhaps it's a matter like an atrophied muscle. We must cultivate these senses like it is a part of our natural forgotten infrastructure to revive the faculties to see the unseen or the higher. And excellent point there, Substance for the Soul. I will say, yes, my sort of spiritual teacher and guru would say, and I think Donna was mentioned in the film Lucy with Scarlett Johansson. I recently watched it or rewatched it the other day. It's a fantastic film, but just on what Substance for the Soul is saying, the professor character in Lucy, if you haven't seen it, forgive me, the professor character in Lucy, his life's research is brain capacity. He's saying the human being only has access to 10% of the brain's power. And so if you consider that seriously and take that in, 10% is not very much. He goes on to say that the dolphins, I think, and whales have access to 20%. But in the film, I'll try not to spoil it, Scarlett Johansson character has some drugs stitched and sewn into her body, and the package comes open, and this drug gives her access to more and more of her mind. And back to your point, Substance for the Soul, my teacher would say that auras, angels, astral planes, the brain thinks it's not important, that we don't care about it, because we don't, much of the culture is secular materialist, scientific materialism. And so it blocks it all out. But if one would begin a practice, a daily routine, read a book about auras or astral beings, reading about it, and this is where there's an argument to be made, isn't there, between sort of madness and genius. If you're reading a book about astral travel, astral realms, astral beings, yeah, you're reading it, you're dedicated, you're disciplined, you're doing the exercises that the book lays out, and you're disciplined and dedicated, let's say, for 12 months, because these things, you don't read a book, do an hour's meditation, and then you're off accessing the astral. It's just discipline, dedication. But then after a year, 12 months, 18 months, you're sort of starting to break through. Your meditations are taking on a different taste. Imagine, just like the character in Plato's cave, imagine your work colleagues, your uninitiated work colleagues. You say, hey, this morning in my meditation, I was talking to an astral being and he said this and it said that. You'll be a candidate for the lunatic asylum, just like McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I think that it is there to be cultivated. Of course, it would be very helpful if you had a teacher who was, like Graham saying, one step ahead of you or multiple steps ahead of you, and who was able to guide you if you tripped or stumbled or fell over, because it could likely be very dangerous if you're in the astral realm exploring about and something, some accident were to occur. You can't call the police or your mum or your best friend from the astral. So in a sense, you're on your own and you must be prepared. Graham says we cannot see higher than our own level. And I think that's fair. And back to Stephen's point, where he's saying we can see the lower levels, but not the higher levels. Donna says there's a reason these things are esoteric. Yes, that's right, Donna, and not accessible to everyone. And what Gurdjieff says is not interesting for everyone. Ouspensky asks him, he says to Gurdjieff early on in Search for Miraculous, why is this knowledge hidden? Why is it not available for the masses? And Gurdjieff says, what are you on about? Of course it's available. It's available to everyone, but no one wants it, which means there's more than enough for us seekers, because no one else wanted it. If everyone in the world wanted esoteric knowledge, then there wouldn't be enough to go round, and everyone would have so little it wouldn't have enough to impact their lives. But because people aren't interested, we have enough for ourselves, to satisfy us, to quench our thirst. And Graham goes on to give an interpretation of the Immaculate Conception. Graham says, that's if we take the story of Mary literally. The Immaculate Conception is consciousness, Donna. And goes on to say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So, well said there, Graham. And perhaps that is what it could mean in some interpretation. Of course, the Christians wouldn't believe that, would they? They would say, no, the angel came and, Immaculate Conception, Son of God, God himself, even the Christians say. Donna says, we have to learn to be satisfied with our own soul and not gratification from sharing everything with others. I agree. But then again, you could argue that by sharing with others, it might be later on, mightn't it? It might be much later that the soul understands or yearns, or the ignorance is dissipated. And so that's why I suppose I'm doing this channel, because my friends and family and work colleagues are very bored, and no one wants to hear this. And so at least with this platform, if one was to begin a YouTube channel, people can take it or leave it, right? You're not an authoritarian infiltrating people's consciousnesses. It's a very sort of democratic thing. If people are interested and find value, they go and listen. And if not, then they just go away. And that's where I'm at. And hopefully, if people discover the Gurdjieff method, as Araj would say, the ideas, and it begins to impact their lives, then for me that's a good thing. But of course, there's a lot of ridicule, a lot of attacks, especially physically, right? With your friends and family, they see you're changing, you're developing, your being's raising, your consciousness is raising, and that brings fear to many people. I think that's the biggest reaction. Fear, you're changing, you're leaving them, you're going away. And of course, they want you to stay. They want the same old person that they've always known. And so that's all for this morning. That's what I wanted to share with you. Like I say, there's another syncretic concept there. And Tahuora says, I want to thank you, Bro Lewis. This was a great way to settle myself before my gig tonight. 5 minutes to showtime. Enjoy, Bro Lewis. Enjoy. Wow, what are you in a band? Tahuora. Are you in a band? Are you doing a solo gig? Tell us. What are you up to? And so that's it. If you want a copy of An Introduction to Proclus, and you've got lots of time on your hand, I want to get into some Proclean philosophy, then reach out, send me an email. I'll happily share that with you. Also, In Search of the Miraculous, chapter 16, you can find it now. You could go and listen to it within the context of the whole chapter, see the diagram and go through it again if that's what you want to do. Or, as Donna said earlier, take off your shoes, go for a walk on the grass and breathe in that wonderful fresh autumn air. You do what you like. And that's it for this morning. Tahuora says, bass player in a band. Excellent. Sounds fantastic. Yeah, well, good luck in your show. Hopefully this talk will help you to access some higher part of yourself and get in the flow state and become possessed by whoever your favorite bassist is. Who's the famous bassist? Flea, isn't it? From Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's got some great little jams or whatever you'd call it. I don't know what you'd call the term, where he goes off on a little solo, bassing it up to the max. So J.K. Tucker says, interesting reading, Lewis, and a really good discussion to follow. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Stephen Lance says, you have boiled that particular kettle and made it whistle indeed. So yes, it's yeah, that's all you can do, isn't it? You can, what's the saying? You can lead the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. And so in this channel, I suppose I'm just telling people about the water, aren't I? I'm saying, hey, did you guys know there's a vast ocean of knowledge available? There you go. You know, have a look. Just even look at it. And hey, Stephen Lahn, you're too generous, my friend. Another wonderful super sticker, and much love to you. I appreciate that very much. Donna asks, Tahuora, do you have the pick of destiny? Do you? So guys, that's it. There's the poll's ongoing. So if you haven't voted yet, get involved. It's currently very close between Don Quixote and Canterbury Tales has come up from behind and taken over. And I'm not too sure about Canterbury Tales, but if it wins, it wins. And so that's all for today, my friends. Thanks for joining. Chapter 16 of In Search of the Miraculous, if you want to go and sort of go deeper into that diagram of everything living and the parts before and after it. Plato's Republic, I think book 6 and 7. Book 6 is the simile of the good. Book 7 is the allegory of the cave. And just for good measure, Plato's Phaedo, because why not? And so, guys, have a great weekend. Look after yourselves. And I will see you Sunday night, where we will be reading whatever wins the poll. Have a great weekend. Look after yourselves. Take care. And I'll see you soon.